Hello you lovely lot and welcome to a new video. Today I have another Patreon monthly illustration. This is the one for July because the one for May/June isn't finished yet. My Patreon for June was actually on pause, and so the one from May kind of carried over, and the suggestion for that was to do class swaps of some of my D&D characters. And I could do as many or as few as I liked, but I decided to do 4, which I thought at the time was a good quantity, and then I realised that was still too many. So that one is still in progress, and I like how it's turning out, but obviously with one character, this one was a lot more quick to finish, so I just thought I'll finish this one up, and then I'll finish that one after. So that will be done, and it will be posted, but for now this is the July one, so they're all kind of in the wrong order. So for this one, my patrons suggested and voted for a Cyberpunk alternate universe version of my character Ez. So you'll probably recognise Ez from my last video where I painted with the watercolours, but he's looking a little bit different now because when the last one was done he had long hair and now he has short hair. So aside from the whole obvious genre switch, he does look a little bit different now. So there will be a full video about Ez, like I've said before. He's going to be in my D&D series of videos, but for now this is just a kind of alternate version of him, as if he was picked up and taken out of his fantasy D&D Ghosts of Saltmarsh setting and put into a future cyberpunk universe. And I was actually really excited to get this kind of prompt because I really love cyberpunk and sci-fi, so my 3 main genres that I enjoy working in are all in the speculative fiction kind of umbrella. So there's high fantasy like D&D kind of thing, which I'm probably the most well known for, then there's steampunk, and then there's sci-fi/cyberpunk. And I'm currently working on projects in all 3 of those genres. I run a D&D campaign which is fantasy steampunk, I've got a novel that's cyberpunk, and so I really loved kind of diving back into this genre again with my work because I feel like I haven't drawn it for absolutely ages. I've been doing a lot of thinking about Wired, and it's, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a project I've been working on since I was about 15 on and off, and over time it's kind of evolved into a different story, and I started to realise it wasn't exactly the story I wanted to tell. I hadn't managed to preserve the essence of the original plot that I had in mind. And so I decided that I'm going to kind of pull it apart and take it down to its basic elements and then rebuild it again. So the characters are all the same, but I'm changing like their backstories and where they came from to get where they are now, and a lot of elements of the plot. So the main sort of essence I want to get back for that story. So in the meantime, while that was kind of all over the place and I didn't know what I was doing with it, I wasn't doing any art. So it's funny because whenever I talk about Wired, a lot of my followers have no idea what I'm talking about because I simply have not been talking about it or posting any art, even though it's been such a big part of my life for so long. It's just that the kind of D&D and fantasy stuff has taken over in recent years because that's been something I've really got into and really enjoyed, and it's also become a big part of my work because I primarily get commissioned to draw D&D characters. So understandably, a lot of people tend to associate my work only with D&D and high fantasy and not science fiction. And a lot of my patrons have been suggesting sci-fi themes for my polls, which has made me really happy. And I appreciate that a lot because it is nice to try something different, and ever since I've been talking more about enjoying sci-fi, those suggestions I've noticed have been increasing. So we'll get like a Space AU version of a character in the suggestions, or a Mass Effect AU version, which I'm not really familiar with Mass Effect, but one of my friends is going to show me some of the game. So there's been a lot of sci-fi stuff creeping into the suggestions list, which I really appreciate my patrons' enthusiasm for that. One of my D&D groups also recently had a space one-shot called Void Walkers, which we streamed on Twitch. I get a lot of people asking if I stream any of my games. Most of them are not streamed, but this one was, and it's also now available to watch on YouTube. So I'll put a link in the description if you'd like to check that out. But yeah, that was a D&D one-shot, but it was set entirely in space. So I played a Warforged, but they were actually a robot, and there was a lot of homebrew content made by our DM, and it was just a really interesting kind of twist. So I had the D&D mechanics and then everything else was sci-fi. And I have been inspired to start thinking about making art from that as well, especially because the ending was, I don't really know how to describe it without spoilers, but the ending sure was an experience. So that has helped me to come up with kind of more ideas regarding like space and sci-fi themes, And it's just been nice to kind of share that with my patrons and think about these different ideas. But yeah, I really enjoyed kind of dipping my toe back into cyberpunk art again. I feel like my artwork has tended to lean towards very consistent kind of colour schemes and themes lately. I tend to default towards pinkish, pastel-y, warm colour schemes and obviously very much more like high fantasy designs, and I would like to be able to vary my colour use more. I'm not really sure how to describe my use of colour particularly, and so just kind of pushing those boundaries. The main thing with these is that I really just want to keep trying something different, like I've mentioned before, and they're kind of like an interesting middle ground for me because they are work, because they're for my Patreon, but I also want to make them into portfolio pieces and use them as practice, but they also feel kind of like personal work as well, because my patrons often suggest my original characters for these polls, and they don't have to. They can suggest literally anything, but they usually suggest my original characters, which I'm very grateful for, because obviously I enjoy drawing my OCs. And so these pieces are kind of distinct from all my other work and give me an opportunity to just keep trying something different with each one. And for this one, what I really wanted to do was push my use of lighting and colour, and I feel like I got quite stagnant with my colour use for a while, and I fell into a lot of traps where I would default to the same techniques every time and not push the boundaries with each illustration. And so I felt quite stagnant, so I've been asking a lot of my friends for advice, and they've given me some great feedback on improving my use of colour and my shading and lighting and so on. And it has really helped, so thank you to my awesome friends for letting me bother you with sending you updates of my pictures and going, how does this look? So that has helped me, because sometimes I will like put on a colour overlay and I'll think, oh, that looks great, and then I will be told that it does not look great, in the nicest possible way. But sometimes I just find it hard to judge my own work and make those decisions, and to have a second pair of eyes or a third or a fourth really helps. I also used a tutorial that I found on Twitter by a user called Roxoa, which I'll link in the description, and that was for the holographic effect on the clothes. So on the kind of bands across Ez's jacket, I used that tutorial, and I really like the end result. I think it looks really reflective. This was also my first time using the 3D models that are available in Clip Studio Paint. So I jumped over from Paint Tool side to Clip Studio about a year ago? No, more than that probably. I've completely lost track of time, as you can probably imagine with things how they are right now. It was probably maybe 2 years ago then, and I'm still getting used to colouring in Clip Studio. I still haven't found my favourite colouring brush. I have found one that replicates Paint Tool size brush quite well, which I'm happy with, but I'm still kind of figuring out all the little details, and one of the main things I hadn't really explored in Clip Studio was the 3D models. And for anyone who's not aware, you can download 3D models from Clip Studio's website. Users can upload them, they can either make them available free or you buy them. And in this case, I bought a set of 3D models which contained items that you might see in like a staff room in an office or a cafeteria. So there was a table, chair, vending machine, a few other things. And I really wanted to put a vending machine in the background of this image, but I also wanted to not spend a huge amount of time on the background, because another thing I'm trying to learn is like streamlining my process and not spending extra time on things I don't necessarily need to. So for this, the vending machine was not a big focus of the image. I didn't want to spend a huge amount of time on it. So what I did was I bought this set, and then I took the vending machine and the bin out of it, and then I put them into the background of my image, rotated them and played around and figured out how all the tools worked, and then finally settled on just going for an image where it was facing directly forwards and Ez was just standing in front of it, because I kind of wanted that backlight around him. And so then what I did was I extracted the line art from the vending machine and I edited it and coloured it and added detail. So I customised all of the designs on the bottles and added labels, and just generally kind of learned as I went what worked and what didn't, because I'm still kind of getting the hang of the different layer modes and layer types and so on. And these models were also available for commercial use, so you can use them for anything, even if you're profiting off of that image, as long as you have edited them in some way and you're not just reselling them, as long as you have actually used them in an illustration. So this was a real learning experience. So I learned how to kind of extract different parts of the 3D model and to blend them into my illustration and kind of make them work, which is very important if you need to work fast for a piece, if you're a comic artist and you do not have the time or the capability, or you just don't want to ruin your wrist, because obviously if you're drawing all day every day, you are going to have to be careful looking after your wrist. And I personally have started to experience some pains in my wrist and elbow sometimes when I draw, which is why I try to remember to do my stretches and take it easy and stop when it begins to hurt. And so it's important to learn those tricks for when you need to cut down the time you spend working on something. And in my case, I really wanted to be able to integrate 3D models into my backgrounds to speed the process up, and also in turn it does help me to figure out how those things work and how I could convey them next time. So speaking of the things that are inside the vending machine, I actually put a lot of, I don't know if you call them Easter eggs, but a lot of references to our campaign, which Ez is into the items inside the vending machine. So you can't really see it on this video, but if you look at the full view on my social media, then you can see them up close. But all of the products have a name on that is a reference to something in our campaign. So we've got Q, Id, Ego, and Shiv, who are all names of the other characters in the campaign. Then we've got Beyond Skeletons on one of the drinks bottles with a little ship, and Beyond Skeletons is the name of our ship as well as the name of the overall campaign. And then on Ez's can of drink that he's holding, it says Zephyrist, it says the first part of the word anyway, and Zephyrist is Ez's hometown. On his t-shirt there's an image of a lightning storm, and Ez is a storm sorcerer. And then on the top right you have a sign that says Blue Morpho, and as I mentioned in the previous video, Ez was the captain of a ship called the Blue Morpho, which unfortunately was stolen and has not been seen since. But that's quite a nice theme I like to keep running whenever I draw him. I just like to kind of add in that theme somewhere, so whether it's a literal butterfly or whether it's the word, I just like to kind of include it. One thing I did forget to do was add like a brand name of some sort to the vending machine. I think that would have been a nice addition to fill some space at the bottom and to find something else to reference, but I couldn't really think of anything that wasn't kind of copyright to Wizards of the Coast, because a lot of things in the campaign, with it being a Ghosts of Saltmarsh campaign, are not our content. So it's part homebrew and then part Wizards of the Coast. So I couldn't really think of anything else, but if I had, I would have liked to add that as kind of like a brand name on the bottom of the vending machine. I also had a lot of fun making Ez into a cyborg, and basically Ez has vitiligo, so his pigmentation is different on the top of his face to the bottom and the top of his arms to his lower arms and so on. So I decided to make those kind of like the segments of the kind of outer shell of cyborg Ez. And also with his ears, I wanted to make them a little bit reminiscent of Persicom ears in Chobits. So Chi has the ears that are pink on the bottom and white on the top. And I decided to do the same with Ez's ears because they're kind of like, they have a gradient like dark green to light green. And so I put that kind of seam line in the middle to split it up to make it a little bit reminiscent of Persicom ears. And also I gave him a cybernetic eye because I just think they look fun. I've got one of the characters in my novel Wired who has a cybernetic eye. His is very similar, so it's got black sclera and then the cyan coloured iris which glows, and I just wanted to kind of bring that in just to add a bit of extra detail and to add a bit of fun little glow to his face. Oh, and also he's got his mask on. This is not related to current world events, it's just a nice cyberpunk trope. I really wanted to draw a mask with fangs on, but then I wanted to also show his tusks because I just like drawing his tusks, so they're poking out just a little bit. But yeah, when you go out with your mask on, don't be like Ez, just wear it, don't do that. So there's probably not a lot of accuracy in this image with regards to the lighting. There's probably a lot of stuff I've taken artistic license with, and it's not quite accurate because there's a lot of light sources and a lot of stuff to process, and I probably didn't get it quite how it should look in reality, but I do feel like I learned a lot working on this piece and I'm really happy with the end result. I will also be making this available as a print, so I'm likely going to make it as a pearlescent print on my store. I think it would look the nicest on that because that paper tends to look really nice with a sort of strong saturated glow on an image. So I will probably put pre-orders up for that at some point, but not until I have some other designs ready to go as well. I really hope you enjoyed watching the process of this illustration, and thank you so much to my patrons for your suggestions and your support. You are absolutely amazing and I appreciate you so much. If you'd like to join my Patreon, there's a link in the description box below. You get to see sketches I don't post anywhere else. You get to see my videos 48 hours in advance, commission access 48 hours in advance, which last time patrons took all the slots before they went public. So yeah, you get 48 hours advance notice to book commissions whenever I have them open, and you get to join my Patreon exclusive parts of my Discord server, and you also get to vote and suggest on these monthly polls. So if you'd like to check that out, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for considering, I really appreciate it. And I hope you enjoyed this video. So hopefully I will be back with the May one quite soon, but I won't make any promises because I made it a bit too complicated for myself. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!